Well, here we are. Happy Markcast Tuesday. Hope everyone had a great Canadian Thanksgiving. It's been a trying weekend here. We're going to get through everything today, the events of the CFL weekend. I'm about 4 hours away from getting on the plane to Vegas, so that'll be good. Kraken opener here in Vegas. So Mariners season and CFL and BC Lions successfully gotten us through here the hockey season. So the CFL can't hurt me anymore here. BC Lions, everything else. We have the good crew here. So I was thinking about this when I was in high school, and this was probably out of your guys' age bracket. There was, Screamo was really big, and there was a band called Thursday, and they had a song called "Understanding." In a car crash, and so I think that is kind of what we will work through today. Understanding in the car crash that was Winnipeg BC Lions. Jason, how are you doing?
Doing good, Reed. Yeah, thanks for having me today, and ready to talk some football.
Evan texting me this morning. Internet issues were all resolved here. Evan, how are you? This has been, you're a BC fan as well.
Yeah, obviously we'll get into the thick of it soon, but very unfortunate circumstance there, on Friday in the Winnipeg BC game. I think we can all agree that game, probably stands out more than any out of the slate this weekend. But we'll get into that.
Jason, did you have a good Canadian Thanksgiving? It's weird. It's like a Monday. I was talking with Dorothy about this. Most people, even if Thanksgiving's a Thursday, you take off Friday and you kind of have the long weekend. How is it here back up at it today?
It was really good. It's weird. Some people have their dinner on the Sunday. That's what my family does. And then we just happen to get the Monday off. So, enjoyed the day off yesterday and watched a crappy CFL game.
Well, you had the day off. So did I think the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I don't know if they were aware of this here. I was sitting there and because Sunday was really good football ride, and we had everything going on with the Cowboys, 49ers, and NFL. And kind of my favorite thing in the world is to watch Skip cry over the Cowboys and watch Stephen A. and kind of all that stuff. And I thought, well, I'll record the game, but I'm going to sit down. Let me sit down. I'm going to watch this Alouettes game, but let me kind of get through all of my morning talk shows. And I said, this isn't even, I'm so glad I didn't waste 3 hours of my life watching this. I watched the highlights and Sean and, getting his 100th sack and all that, but really crazy here. I know REDBLACKS, the season's basically done. Jason, were you surprised this was such an egg?
Yeah, the last 2 weeks, really, they've just come out completely flat in this matchup. I thought that the first two games between the Alouettes and the REDBLACKS this season were very close. They lost by a combined 9 points, but to come out so flat the last couple of weeks, just very disheartening. You thought at the beginning of the season that this season may have been a little bit different for the REDBLACKS, but unfortunately, much the same.
Yeah, here. So, their season was done and they were kind of already out of everything. And this just kind of cemented that, kind of pad Alouettes roster here. Evan, you were traveling and I saw a photo. You said they had the game on your plane. What was going on?
Yeah, had a live TV on my plane, which I didn't expect, and they had CBS Sportsnet, so I got the REDBLACKS game. Of course, by the time we were in the air, the game was nearly over. But, overall, this one really not much to say. Ottawa just didn't really turn up, and unfortunately for them, while they obviously have some good players and they do have some momentum, this is definitely a team where you're looking at, possible big changes coming in the offseason. And again, there's a lot of people in that building that I respect, but ultimately, it's been a tough slide for Ottawa here. There was a time, I guess it's been a couple months now, which is saying a lot, but a couple months ago, there was a time where things, did look promising. There was a bit of momentum, but ultimately, this team right now only has 4 wins on the season. And, they're at a point it's weird to think that, we kind of thought that Edmonton was in the basement and it wasn't going to get any worse. But to be honest, because of the way the season's progressed, you could really make the argument that Ottawa, has now become the least fun team to watch. And maybe Calgary too, they're kind of both in that area. All those teams I've just mentioned have 4 wins. But really Ottawa, your season's already kind of been put away. This game, eliminates you, I believe. And then, you just turn up and you pretty much lay an egg. 3 points, no one really, I don't think anyone was really paying attention to an extent. So it's unfortunate. They've obviously had a lot of struggles this year. A lot of people thought that this was going to be a big year for Ottawa. I thought last year could have been a big year for them, but obviously they've been through, a lot of unprecedented situations, I guess. Obviously, not having Jeremiah Masoli there for a large portion of both of those seasons plays a role. But yeah, I don't know what this team's going to do in the future. I feel like, with a team like Calgary, who has the same amount of wins, and they might be in a different, conference, a team like that, they've at least had, a winning culture for many years, and they've gone to the playoffs, and you kind of have established success. For a team like Calgary, you're entering new territory. But if you're Ottawa, this has kind of been a theme now for a couple seasons, and it really feels like, you really have to start making some significant changes to get over the hump, even if you felt like you made significant changes before that should have gotten you over the hump already, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Well, and I feel like, and I want to get Jason's thoughts on this. Like, I don't know, this season to me wasn't lost. I mean, we certainly thought that, with the Mazzoli and everything, but like, it felt like there was this momentum here that's just, and I don't know if this is a Bob Dice thing or if they just didn't have enough talent there. Like, what do you attribute to? Because we're, like Evan said, we're, Edmonton seemed lost, and now it's like Chris Jones is coach of the year because he played Trey Ford. Like, I mean, this wasn't out of hand until it just, I think in kind of the last month or so. Where do you attribute the fall off to?
It's difficult to say because obviously the injuries to the quarterbacks will hurt any team. But I think that considering the situation for a lot of other teams around the league this season, you can't necessarily use that as an excuse. And I think that the troubling thing is the last several years this has happened for the Red Blacks. It seems like we've seen the exact same season play out 4 years in a row, 4 seasons in a row, 4 in the last 5 years because of the canceled season. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what they do. Do they clean house again? I don't think Bob Dice is a CFL level head coach. He really hasn't proven anything to this point this season. I think that, the offense looks lifeless. They don't really have any excitement to them. One thing I wanted to rant about is the fact that they put Nick Arbuckle into this game. Like, what a waste of time. I think that, no disrespect to Nick Arbuckle, but we know who he is in this league right now. And to put him in garbage time, I don't think it really served much of a purpose. If you're going to put someone else in there, put, Tyrell Pigram, who's their third string guy, in there. But I think at the end of the day, I shook my head when I saw that. And I think it really epitomizes the decision-making that's going on in Ottawa right now.
No, I saw that, and I saw your tweet, and you said, well, no disrespect. Or no, I said, no, like, Jason, you watch every single one of these games. You cover this league every week. Like, yeah, say that. Like, yes, say that. Voice your opinion on that because it is ridiculous. We know what Arbuckle is. I don't understand that. Like, I don't know how big like the Thanksgiving Day game, like, in the States, the Thanksgiving football is crazy, and we got 3 games now. Like, I don't know if that holds the same level up there, but if you were sitting around your family to watch this game, unless you're Tim Capper and Cliffy watching this game, I just can't imagine. And I think they were doing a fan meetup. I saw it's like I'm sure they had a hell of a time, and my team beat up on anyone, but anyone else in the world watching this game, would not have been exciting. Evan, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the Montreal side of things, which is probably the more positive side, biggest storyline from this game, I think, for everybody across the CFL was Sean Lemon, crossing 100 sacks in his career, an incredible accomplishment. You're up there with guys like Charleston Hughes and, a couple others. But, yeah, nice to see Sean Lemon get his 100th career sack, especially because it took him a bit, to get signed. He came into the season as a free agent. He was with Calgary last year, and they opted not to bring him back, which I find to be a very interesting decision, given that this is, looking to be the first year where Calgary isn't in the playoffs in, X many years. Very interesting decision to not bring Sean Lemon back. I get that he's old, but, he went to Montreal, and, he's been, a sack god, essentially, since he's arrived there, for lack of a better term. So, yeah, good to see Sean Lemon. A couple other things. Cody Fajardo, I wasn't an amazing game, but, he completed 28 of 32 passes, which I thought was extremely impressive. Even if he didn't have a ton of yards, didn't have a ton of touchdowns, whatever. 28 of 32s, that's a really high number. So that stood out to me right off the bat. And then someone that's really come into form here late in the season has been Tyson Philpott. Not somebody again that we had talked about at large during the season, or earlier in the season, I suppose, but someone who now is really starting to come into form. And again, just another weapon there in Montreal. They've had so many guys. I think Keon Julian Grant is out with an injury, so maybe this has something to do with it. But like Tyler Sneed, obviously we've spoken about Austin Mack ad nauseum this season, and I think he's an all-star level player. I don't think there's much debate about that. And yeah, ultimately, for Montreal, this was, I think for them, it just kind of felt like business as usual, just getting the job done. We all know this is a team they can beat and should beat, and they went out there and they did just that. So good for them to get the win on Thanksgiving. And again, good for them to have a player reach a very significant milestone, one of the better players that the league has seen.
Yeah, I just looking ahead here. I got the schedule. Montreal going into Edmonton feels very winnable there. This Ottawa at the Argos. Now, this could be the kind of the zombie Argos here headed into the the playoffs, but it could be interesting there. Yeah, Jason, Cody doing good on that. I was just watching, the Raiders Packers game last night. Feels a little bit, feels a little Jimmy G that way. Okay, I got my little 7-yard passes going down the field. Anything else stand out to you about this? Like I said, except unless you're hosting the fan event by with the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, I can't imagine this was that elating to anyone else.
Yeah, I would argue this is arguably like one of the most boring games of the CFL season. I mean, there's definitely some other contenders for that as well, but I would put this game right up there. And in terms of Cody Fajardo, I think where I am at with him, I think he's kind of like, if you guys are familiar with back in the day, the Andy Dalton scale, where it's like, if you have a quarterback that's better than Andy Dalton, then you have your guy. If somebody's worse than Andy Dalton, you have to get a new quarterback. I think Cody Fajardo is that guy in the CFL where he's just that league average starter, and he's not necessarily a high upside guy, but he's not necessarily like a low floor kind of guy either. So I mean, he does just enough to get this team some wins, but we'll see how he does come playoff time.
Yeah, I just had Joshua Antwi on, right? And I was like, oh, what do you make of like Cody and everything? It's like, oh yeah, he's kind of a leader. I'm like, okay, like I don't know. To me, Cody strikes me more as like the hoorah, yippity, guy in the locker room, but maybe he's not. Maybe he just goes out there and plays. Evan, any other thoughts? Cody, anything else? No. Okay. Well, so let's get into this. So, game of the season, I would say thus far here. People wanting to know. Well, actually, no, we got to do this Saskatchewan one first. I'm jumping ahead here. Okay, that's good. All right. So, what did we make of this? I listened to this game driving home. My whole weekend was torn asunder here, and we were driving back from BC, and I said, "Oh, let me pull on the 620 CKRM or whatever. I'm going to listen to Ballsy on here." And so I listened to Michael Ballsy and Luke Molinder call this game. So what did we make of this one while I get this going here? Jason, we'll go to you first.
Well, I mean, first of all, from the Saskatchewan perspective, what a flat performance after, the emotion of the pregame ceremony with the George Reed, honoring of him. And I mean, I was just shocked that this team didn't come out with any, kind of fire. And I thought that, given the history of these two teams playing in this stadium, Hamilton had not won since the Roughriders opened the new stadium in, I think it was 2016. So, I mean, a historic win for the Ticats from that perspective. But, I mean, Saskatchewan, I was just so, flabbergasted with how they came out and played in this game. And then from the Hamilton perspective, Bo Levi Mitchell, I know he only threw 6 passes, and they took him out of the game for load management purposes. I guess it's because he suffered 2 major injuries already this year. They want to just get his feet wet, but he looked really good in this game. I mean, he had a great completion to Tim White, had a couple of other nice throws as well. So that's really promising to see from the Ticats perspective. And then Matthew Schultz looked really good when he came into the game as well. So maybe this 1-2 punch at quarterback could work. If Bo's not having it that day, maybe Schultz can come into the game and win a playoff game for us. But I think at the end of the day, the Ticats are starting to build some positive momentum. I think they've won 5 of their last 7 games or 6 of their last 8 games or something like that. Their only losses being to Toronto over that stretch. So some real positive momentum being building in Hamilton.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about that, this scares me. This BC going in, we'll talk BC, but Hamilton came in and cleaned your clock at home the other way. So certainly on that. I will say, listening like the George Reed of it all, I saw more people and we've been talking on here for weeks, calling for Dickinson's head and like this team's flat and like we need change more so ever than after this. I mean, talking about laying the egg at home, Hamilton coming in. I will say though, we give him crap, but I thought Michael Ball, I thought he was, I don't listen to like Sports Cage where he's probably doing a lot more controversial stuff, but like calling the game, I thought was fine. I like Luke. He's been on the show as well. So I think that it's a good situation there. I know we give Michael Ball a lot of crap on here, but I thought that at least for like the home team, if you're a Saskatchewan fan listening to that, Evan, did you catch any of this game?
A bit, yeah. I mean, here's the thing for me. So I expected Hamilton to win this game, and I understand that there was a lot of emotion, surrounding Saskatchewan. Obviously, a lot of things, happening lately, a lot of things to be honored, etc. But I expected Hamilton to win this game. Just thought that right now they looked like the better team, and I mean, this might have been, again, one of their most complete performances of the season. Just feels like even with their, somewhat change, it feels like they're getting better too, down the stretch. As Jason pointed out, Bo Levi, even limited action, looked much better than he did at the beginning of the season. And he wasn't playing much then either. Injuries plagued him, and it's kind of surprising that he's playing at all again this season. But they put him in there, and he looked very good in limited action. And then Matthew Schultz came in after that and looked honestly even better. Besides the one interception, I mean, he had an outstanding game. Was definitely ready to go again. So yeah, a lot of things there in Hamilton. I mean, the other thing would be James Butler, going over 1,000 yards on the season. I was very surprised. I forget what the specific year was, but I think it was Hamilton's first 1,000-yard rusher in like 10 years or more than 10 years.
2010.
Yep. So yeah, 13 years. I was really surprised by that. But good for James. Obviously, that one means a lot to me personally. Having connected with James over the years, and very good guy, well deserving of that. Really nice to see him, kind of carve this, new career out in the CFL. A lot of people don't know, but he was in Saskatchewan at one point. Before he really, I mean, that was even before the XFL. That was 2019. He was in Saskatchewan. A lot of people don't know about that. So this was kind of a revenge game for him in a way. But the real story here that kind of came out of nowhere on the Hamilton side was Omar Bayless. Now, a lot of people don't know this either, but Omar Bayless in 2019, he was second in the nation, in the U.S., in receiving yards behind Jamar Chase here at LSU. And of course, he was at Arkansas State. So, G5 program, it might not be the same, but spent some time with Carolina, Kansas City, and then didn't even that was a name that I hadn't heard in a while. I didn't even realize he was in Hamilton. And then here he, comes into this game and has 2 touchdowns. So that was good to see from him, a little bit of a boost at the end of the season. And then, I mean, Saskatchewan, it was kind of ironic because Saskatchewan fell flat in a lot of areas where they don't, but the one area where I criticized them, I guess, to an extent, over the course of the season was their run game, and saying that they really couldn't get the ball going on the ground, and that was a detriment. That was the reason that I don't think that they could be in a lot of games that they otherwise might have a chance in. But in this one, Jamal Morrow comes back and has 120 yards and a touchdown, but the rest of the offense doesn't really muster up anything. And unfortunately, for them, that was it. Like, I didn't expect them to lose this badly. Again, I projected Hamilton to win, but 38-13 was not a score on my bingo card. So that's very unfortunate. Again, obviously for Saskatchewan, given the circumstances, you could argue that this might have been the most emotional game of their season, even though they've obviously had a couple of other big performances and games that maybe mattered more. Look back at the Banjo Bowl, things like that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I saw we had we have a comment here. Saskatchewan stopped playing. I kind of agree with that. It's like you're still. I can't remember who. If it was it Arash? Someone tweeted out that they think that on the West you should be able to have Trey Ford and just a bunch of leftover players that kind of do an all-star team to be that third spot in the West because there's not. I mean, like Jason, what are we doing here? I mean, Riders are going to. We'll talk BC, but I mean, Riders are going to go into BC Place and get their clocks clean. I mean, what are we looking at here for a semis?
I mean, it could be Calgary. I mean, against all odds, because, Calgary and Saskatchewan play on Friday. Calgary wins that game. And that game, by the way, is at McMahon. Calgary wins that game. They're only a game behind in the win column, but they're actually even in the loss column. And Calgary has 3 games left to play. Saskatchewan only has 2. So, I mean, it's very realistic that Calgary could end up getting that seed, that 3rd seed against all odds. But how do you have any confidence in either of these teams right now? This has to be like the saddest playoff race I've ever seen since I've started watching the CFL.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a weird schedule here the last couple weeks, and then you have where was I looking at it here? This Hamilton, Montreal, and then could be back, back to back here going into the summer. It's just kind of a weird scheduling coming out of that. Yeah, the Bo Levi of it, Jason, because I was listening to the game, they had on their new alt ones. Did they have the Ticats?
Yeah,
they had that because they were Ballsy was having a hell of a time. Who's in the game now? Because I think the numbers I don't think it's a dark enough contrast with the gray. Because Bo was in, and then they put in Matthew Schultz, and they're like, "Oh, Bo Levi Mitchell with a crazy run down the field," and then they're like, "Oh wait, that's not Bo. That's not Bo. That's Matthew Schultz." I thought, Bo is just picking up and running 20 yards down the field. How did you think Bo looked? Evan, I think texted the group like, "Oh, did Bo get hurt or what?" Bo's out. It's like, no, it sounded like it was planned here. What did you make of that? As Tim Capper checking in? Tim, we celebrated your Alouettes. Go back talking about the fan event and everything else. So, Jason, what did you make of Bo?
Well, I mean, it was a very short appearance, obviously, but I think this is the best we've seen from Bo Levi Mitchell in, honestly, a couple of years. He looked very sharp. The ball was popping out of his hands. He looked like he had, the arm strength necessary to make those throws. And that touchdown to Omar Bayless was very nice. And I have a little story about Omar Bayless as well. My best friend, actually, he works for Bell, a big telecom company up here in Canada, and he actually set up Omar Bayless's internet the other week. So pretty cool connection to the Ticats there. But Bo, I thought looked pretty good, and we'll have to see a larger sample size. I'm really interested to see if he gets the full game against BC on Friday.
Yeah, Bo, the first pass was almost intercepted. So let's be fair, right? Or at least it sounded like, again, I'm listening to it driving down the road, but they're like, "Oh, Bo Levi." And then he settled down. Evan, thoughts of this? I mean, we like Schultz and Bo coming back, and I don't know, Schultz has gotten the Ticats to this position. We've kind of had this debate, but now that Bo's back playing, what do you make?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Hamilton might be the only team in the CFL where they could be comfortable starting 3 different quarterbacks. Not a lot of teams have that luxury. I mean, even Toronto, Brian Scott, obviously we love him, but there's a bit of a question mark on that. Yeah, you've got Chad Kelly. Yeah, you've got Cameron Dukes. But, I mean, having 3 quarterbacks there in Hamilton that, could start, obviously Taylor Powell being the 3rd guy, that's a real luxury that you don't see very often, and not something that I really expected from a team like this. But again, that gives Hamilton a lot of options moving forward. And I know we talked last week about, is it good to kind of switch up the quarterback situation, or should they have just rolled with Powell? I was kind of on the side that they should have just rolled with Powell. But, I mean, you look at what Bo Levi and Matt Schultz did, in the game this weekend, and it's like, well, maybe there is something there that you can build off of. I think a lot of us had written off Bo Levi Mitchell, myself included. Again, I was very surprised that, he's playing again this season, but, clearly came in, he was ready to go. He was fired up. And, I don't know, again, he was on a snap count, right? It was limited. So, I don't know, is that an accurate projection of what he'd look like if you started him for a whole game? I don't know. I still feel like Schultz is a bit of a safer option right now because, he's been there for a bit. Going back to last year, he kind of knows things, and obviously we've seen him, in some capacity this season. Again, he got injured pretty early on too, but we know who Matt Schultz is. He played in Montreal for some time too. So I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see, how Hamilton kind of, uses that. Of course, in the past, you got to think, we're talking about one guy, but they've used 2 guys in the past, Jeremiah Masoli, Dane Evans. They've kind of bounced between the 2 at times, when they had both of those options. So that's kind of a new storyline that's opened up here for me as well. Definitely interested to see over the course of the next couple weeks, if you're Hamilton, maybe you I don't know if you're really at the point where you feel comfortable experimenting or if you just want to go off the momentum. But, definitely maybe some decisions to be made there. We will see.
Yeah, Jason, I think I think Blake, right? Your NFL co-host here. Feel bad for your Ticats because they're going to lose by 20 plus points. Here we're a little bit of crap talking. Jason, anything else? This one, the Schultz of it all. I mean, you're the Ticats guy. Like, I feel pretty good right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and another big development, I think, is the defense is starting to play a lot better. I mean, this was probably the worst defense in the CFL the first half of the season, but they've changed some stuff up. I think, they've maybe changed some stuff up scheme-wise, and I think they're starting to look really good on that side of the ball. Jagarrett Davis, against all odds, has came back, after that voided trade with Calgary earlier this season. I think he had a partially torn meniscus, so he rehabbed that. Game back on the field with the Ticats, and I think he's playing his ass off out there, even though he doesn't have a sack yet this season. I mean, I think he's really making an impact the last couple of weeks, getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So I think the defense is another positive sign for the Ticats.
Still kind of getting ready for the buzzsaw here. That is the Argos, but could be interesting. I mean, I think whatever happens, this East semi has to be more exciting than whatever is going to go on in the West. I mean, it's just really disappointing. Jason, are you? I don't know, given the expectations that we were at the beginning of the season, are we good sitting at third here with a chance to get in?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of relieved how this season's turned out, because it certainly could have been worse. I think that 1 point 0-3 to start the season, so we finally this week just got back to 500 for the first time this season. Big chance this week to potentially finish the season strong and get a winning record. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to if they can beat Montreal on the road. That's going to be a tough task. Montreal's kind of owned the Ticats recently, so I'm very interested to see how that game plays out. And like you said, it's going to be much more interesting than what's going to happen out west. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting.
So they have a week 20 bye? Huh.
Yeah, and Montreal as well. So
nothing like the double buys in the 9-team league. Evan, anything else at this one? We'll get to BC Winnipeg.
I don't think so. Although, I mean, I do find it interesting how, the last thing I'll add, I guess, is, Hamilton started 0-3, and it seems like they do that every year. They kind of put themselves in a hole and they climb back out. And this season, I didn't think they'd do it. I didn't think that they had, the capacity to do it. But as Jason's pointed out, they've changed a couple things, made some adjustments, and now this team really does look like a proper playoff team. Again, we'll see, going into Montreal, whatever, how that turns out. But I feel like they have a good chance. I'm kind of pulling for Hamilton here late in the season.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think Orlando probably protects his job here. He's like, you're just kind of good enough. And I think a lot of the NFL teams kind of get away with that too, where there's really only so many contenders and like, well, we were good enough. Like I was watching that, was it the Ravens-Steelers game over the weekend, and they were showing Harbaugh and Tomlin sitting there talking. I'm like, you guys have both just kind of wallowed in like, yeah, we're just good enough here for the last. I know Harbaugh's a great coach, but you know what I mean? Like, the Steelers have had a winning record for the last 15 years or whatever under Mike Tomlin. Like, okay, like that's cool. So, anyway, so let's get to this, and I want to get your guys' thoughts because then I'll get into whatever. But driving up, going up to Vancouver, people always like, well, why didn't you go up here more often? Like, we left at 2:40. We drove directly to our hotel and checked in at 6:45. So 4-hour drive. Like, it's not as easy as people like ran across the street and got to the game about 7:05. So missed the first drive with all of that. But and then traffic coming home Saturday, trying to get through the border with the Canadian holiday and then everything else. Like really, really crazy. Ended up having to go sneak through the duty-free shop and buy vodka so that we could cut the line. Quite a memorable weekend for lots of different reasons. But I'll defer to you guys first. Jason, what did we make of this game of the season and just kind of overall thoughts, and then we'll get into the minutia.
Yeah, it's weird because I thought that BC was probably the better team for a large portion of this game. But Winnipeg just showed the heart of a champion down the stretch, and BC just showed that they were not ready for the moment when it came down. Winnipeg was able to put things together and just They had like this one play, Farhan was talking about on the broadcast, where they would fake it to Oliveira and then throw a quick pass out to the flat, and BC just had no answer for that play. They would run it over and over and over again. So, I mean, I don't think BC made the adjustments on the defensive side late in the game, and the offense just stalled completely in the second half.
Yeah, I don't know. It really felt like BC owned it for a long time. Evan, thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, first of all, just the stakes in this game can't be overlooked. I mean, this was, we talked about this from week one. Like there was going to be a scenario like this at some point in the season where someone really had to make the statement and someone really had to take control or take advantage of the situation to really, come out as the dominant team. And BC, they were so close. They were so close, but it was just these one or two little things, and that's, if that ends up, if it really ends up being their season, which again, right now, this is the regular season game. Yes, the stakes were still high, but you're not eliminated from anything. You still have some football to play. There's still some things to build off of. So it's not over, but we all know how this makes things look in terms of standings and, playoff seeding, everything like that. This was supposed to be BC's game, and they, I mean, you were the one that was there in person, Reed, but from what it sounded like and from what I heard and everything like that, from what I saw, I guess, it looked like a very good turnout. People understood the significance of this game, and I'm sure there might have been a decent amount of Winnipeg fans there too, given, again, it goes both ways. But, man, where do I even begin? It's, I could talk about the botched third down call, which, that's, very controversial, right? We see that happen in the NFL, I think, a lot now where, I guess you'd say ref interference maybe plays a role. Me personally, I don't like to blame any game on the ref. I feel like if you're going to put an entire game on one decision that could have gone either way, the reality is the team probably could have done more to begin with, and I feel like BC was in that position. Like they could have, capitalized on more, especially in the second half. I kind of felt like they came out and, maybe they just got too comfortable. They kind of thought they had things in the bag, but Winnipeg is not the team that you want to get comfortable against. That's for sure, and that really showed. That last play, I don't know who the receiver was, but when they were running, obviously,
Dominic,
yep, Rhymes, yeah. Very interesting decision to not, go down and just clock it and, take a field goal, and then that's it, right? Because they had it. Like it was, I go back and I look at that play, and obviously, the smart decision is to, take a knee or, just slide and then, take the field goal. And I know you were very vocal about that, Reed, but it's almost crazy to me how we were a couple yards away from a walk-off touchdown in the CFL's, arguably biggest game of the season. I mean, it was a couple yards, by the time that clock hit 000. So, yeah, there's a lot, again, a lot to go over. You can look at, the third down call where it initially looked like Vernon had it. The ref stepped in and said, no, you don't. Stop. Winnipeg, gets the ball and then inevitably ties it up with a field goal. I just think, the one thing that I can't stop thinking about, and this is a more general thing. I mean, I just went over a lot of specific plays, a lot of specific moments, BC's lack of, I guess you could say, enthusiasm in the second half. Again, kind of getting a bit more comfortable. Put all that aside, I think the one thing here, that really stands out, and I brought it up, I think, on the show last week, if I recall correctly, but, BC with, I don't know how many, it looks like, less than 50 yards rushing. I don't know, like, where's the ground game? This is a game where, again, I was saying you really want to establish, another element to your offense. Yes, I get Vernon can throw. He had another 350-yard passing game with a passing touchdown. He can move the ball. We get that. There's no need to prove that anymore. But I'm looking, it's like Taquan Mizell, 6 carries for 23 yards, and you're averaging, less than 4 every time you touch the ball. That's not going to cut it the game of the year. And I've been saying about that with certain teams, BC, Saskatchewan. You're not going to win games when your offense only has that one element to it. Yes, it's fun to watch BC air it out and have these big passes. We all know Vernon loves to take those deep shots down the field. And again, like I just pointed out, he had another 350-yard game, another 100-yard receiver. Like, we get it. They're good in that department. We don't need to see that anymore. But what I really needed to see was a bit more of the ground game. And I'm not asking for much. I don't need Mizell to go off and have, 100 yards. And I get that they have a very pass-focused offensive strategy, which you might want to have in the CFL compared to anywhere else. But you just got to have a bit more than that. You got to have a bit more than that in a game, that's so important. And then you go to Winnipeg, where if you look at their run game, like Brady Oliveira had a slower day by his standards, but still had 67 yards and a touchdown and averaged over 6 yards a carry, which is extremely efficient. And that goes without saying. Even their second rusher, Dakota Prukop, who's a quarterback, had 5.6 yards per carry and was very efficient with limited work. So I think that's the main thing for me above all is, I'm not going to say that the reason that BC couldn't run the ball was the sole reason that they lost this game, but, this was really an opportunity for them to show another part of their offense and give fans more confidence in that area, but they didn't. And you could definitely contribute that to, I think, a reason as to why they were unable to finish this game.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, good crowd, not great crowd. I think I saw the attendance was like 24,000. Good. BC place is just, enormous. They're going in. We were looking at the capacity there, but it was interesting. Matt Baker had gotten us tickets and, great seats, and we're 50-yard line. It was awesome. And kind of in our section, it felt to me like there was a mix, right? You had kind of like the old school CFL guys, and there was a guy there with his dad that I was kind of like describing the plays. I don't know if he was kind of hard of seeing or whatever, kind of, you could tell like kind of lifelong season ticket holders. And then the people on the other side of us, I think, had won tickets in the giveaway. And so they were like, oh yeah, we went to the CFL a couple years ago, or we haven't been forever. Like, okay, is this a playoff game? Like, what's going on? Like, I think there was a lot of, I think Baker and the BC team had done a good job trying to get the word out of how important this game was, if that makes sense. Because even after the game, we were talking with people at the restaurant. They're like, oh, is BC out now? Like, what's going on? It's like, well, no, but this was, kind of the season because we wanted the home field advantage, all that stuff. Great game. Like you said, felt like BC really keeping Winnipeg, limiting the damage early on, right? If we're looking at the points here, second half, Vernon kind of disappeared on that. But yeah, there were the two things that stood out to me was obviously, and if I'm remembering, it was the second, and this is from the game last night, but it brings up my point. When Vernon was rushing, I think it was the second down, right, Jason? And then the third down, we got stopped, and Vernon clearly, I went back and looked at the, even just like on my phone, whatever, clearly gets the first down. It's spotted short. Then we go for it, third and short, and then obviously we don't get it. But, there has to be, and last night we had the Green Bay game where, you can see, and they go back and review it, like, talking with Farhan, and obviously I wasn't watching the game with his commentary, but talking with him afterward, and he's going to be on the show this week. So we'll kind of talk through all that stuff as well. But, you need to have a booth review there. You need to have a booth review. This is the biggest game of the year. You need to be able to have that. He clearly got it. And then, then you go out and you do the third and short. Okay. Like, we definitely should have had that, but you shouldn't have even been put in that situation. And then the Dominic Rhymes thing of it all, like, you have to know the rules. You have to know the rules. You have to know that you can get down. And it felt to me, it was earlier this year, was like the Edmonton game where they gave up the rouge or whatever, and they didn't know. Like, I can't even remember, one of the receivers. Like, you have to know that you need to go down there, and you need to have your coaches need to tell you. And I don't know if that's on Rick or what, but like, if you catch the ball, you need to go down, because it was a chip shot field goal at that point. Sean Wyatt had been automatic all day. Like, I don't understand what the deal was there and why he. I mean, to me, that's the game. And then you go into overtime, and Winnipeg comes out. I think I saw the stat where Mike O'Shea's, they've opted to take the ball first, like, whatever, and they're 5-1 in terms of overtime of taking the game. Rick Campbell, we defer. They get the 8. We don't get anything. And it just, we're sitting there in the stands, and we're like, this game should have been over 20 minutes ago. I mean, it was really frustrating. Jason, what did you make of that? Because, like, the Rhymes not going down, I mean, yes, there's a million things that go into it, but I mean, that really did cost the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, somebody deserves blame for that, whether that's, the coaching staff for not, insisting that if this happens, that this very scenario happens, you have to get down, and because there's likely going to be time left on the clock, because any other scenario, the receiver is going to be trying to get as many yards as possible. But yeah, you need to know the time, the situation of the game, the magnitude of the situation, and Rhymes just simply kind of had a brain fart in that situation, ran out the rest of the clock, and then in overtime, the exact same fate that the Lions suffered was actually what Hamilton suffered against the Bombers in the Grey Cup, when Winnipeg got the ball first, scored the touchdown plus the 2-point conversion, and then Hamilton had the interception right away on their first possession of overtime. So I mean, not necessarily surprised. I think that it's interesting with the strategy that teams deploy in terms of the overtime rules. Like they always tend to try to defer to the second possession, but it happens to, like you said, I think that most of the time the team that gets the ball first actually ends up winning. So it's kind of weird how the strategy's kind of been different with that, but I think at the end of the day, just a missed opportunity for BC.
Yeah, because I get that. Like, okay, let's see what they do. And then, like, we know, right? Like, hey, we got to score here. But yeah, I think the other way, I think going out as the aggressor, BC's defense is gassed at that point. Like, let's give them a few minutes to kind of regroup there. It was a couple weeks ago, and it was the Chiefs and Jets game where Mahomes, got the first down, slid short of the goal line, and they were able to run the clock out. And that Emmanuel Ocho, whatever, was like, I can't, like, he's like, Patrick Mahomes is so smart, like knowing that. I'm like, top 5 paid quarterback in the world knows the rule of his sport. Like this should not be this should be the rule, not the exception. But like, here you go. You have to know the rules. You have to know how it works. And I would not, I don't know how a locker room reacts to that, right? Like, do you give Rhymes a pass, or do you not say anything? Like, I don't, do you hold that against him? I don't know, but I do feel like that was the season. I don't see BC going in and winning. We have a lot of comments here talking about, Winnipeg running the ball in the cold. And it was so frustrating because I know it wasn't the season, but it really felt like the season. Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. There is still a lot of football left, and anything can happen. I know BC's hungry, and I know like they've been handed, like Winnipeg, kind of owns them in terms of, they've been making all this progress the past couple seasons, but like even last year, like, you look at what happened, like Rourke comes back, everything looks good, and then, they still get beat, and that was because they were in Winnipeg. I think you can contribute a large portion of, again, Winnipeg winning just because they have that home field advantage. It really is, that big of a deal. And especially, BC has struggled on the road this season at times. We know that. We've talked about it before. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't want to count BC out yet. I really don't. I feel like they can finish out the season strong, and they will ride into Winnipeg with momentum. But it's still going to be a really big challenge to go into Winnipeg with that team. And we just know how poised and calm and collected that team is. I mean, they really are the Chiefs of the CFL. I mean, yes, there's only 9 CFL teams, 32 NFL teams, but I think if you can, draw a somewhat direct comparison, Bombers are Chiefs in the sense that they have a veteran quarterback who just knows and can just get the job done. Like the second that game went to overtime, and again, a couple of things that we talked about here, that would have led to a BC win, and they wouldn't have had to go in overtime, whatever. You can't change the past. But the second that game went into overtime, I knew and Winnipeg gets the ball, and I'm like, yeah, like it's time to turn the TV off. And I did watch. I mean, I watched the rest of the game, but I knew, like, it's sometimes it's too hard to overcome. And like you pointed out, defense is gas. Like, if anything, you should be getting the ball, on offense. If you want to win, to try and make a statement. I understand that, that might not always be the mentality, but I don't know, against Winnipeg, like giving the ball back to them right away, I'm like, no, like you can't be doing that. And yeah, they went down there and, scored no problem, got the 2-point conversion, and that was all she wrote. So yeah, it's tough. If you're BC, this is, I don't know how you feel. I mean, this was kind of one of those games where, you had prepared for it kind of all season. And it's tough too, because there was a time where, BC flattened Winnipeg, And that game happened obviously a lot earlier in the season. But if you're a BC fan, you almost wish that those two games could be flipped. You know what I mean? And that game could have happened now, where they just go out there and, drop 50 or whatever. And, you don't even have to worry about all these weird overtime scenarios and, third downs and getting the ball back and all that stuff. Just really, really tough for a team like the Lions. And, I don't want to call you out, Jason, but I know like your NFL team is the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills, I think, are in a situation now in the NFL where, I almost felt like it last year, but definitely this year more than any, where, it's kind of that make or break season. You've been gaining momentum for a long time. You're on the brink of a Super Bowl. You have the talent that you can do it, or in this case, Grey Cup with the Lions is the comparison I'm drawing. You're on the brink of a championship, but there's always one or two things in the way that you just can't seem to overcome for one reason or another. And, the Lions, as much as I want to, root for them and will continue to do so, I still like the team. I still like what they have. I've been a strong supporter of what they've been doing. Obviously, still a couple areas that they could improve in, as many other teams could. Every team really could do that. But my point being, they just, I don't know, like if they can't get over the hump this year, are they going to have that again next year? Are they going to be able to do the same things? I know, like Buffalo, the team that I'm comparing this to, they have been able to do that, year after year after year, win multiple games, go to the playoffs, be in that same position. But I don't know. I feel like, it gets to a point where you really are at a crossroads. And even if you do have, the same personnel and you are able to carry that into next season, you just kind of lose a lot of mental focus. I think you have to keep telling yourself, like, okay, like, we have to get over this. And I know, like, there's just so many times where it's like you work, and I see it too much where a team, works for something the whole season. And yes, every game matters, but some are going to matter more than others. And then, they end up with the same result time after time after time. And it's just like, how many years, can you put in all that work just to get defeated in such a key moment? And then it doesn't amount to anything. So I know that sounds very grim. I don't want to make this sound, sad or, whatever, but that's the reality sometimes in football. Like, teams just know other teams better, and there's a lot of good teams, but some of them might just never reach that mountain peak. And that's I almost, it's a great debate. It's almost, would you rather have a losing season and just kind of build from scratch, or would you rather have all this momentum and get really excited only to kind of have a knife jabbed into your heart at the end of the season? So again, that's another debate, but that's my thoughts on sort of the general situation. I know a lot of what I just talked about is away from the game itself that was played this weekend, but I know if you're a fan in BC, you're kind of thinking about all those things, and I wanted to acknowledge that.
No, I think this is the window. I mean, that's, like I said, we were talking, and I've talked with BC people, and obviously kind of on and off air, but it feels like this is the window right now. You kind of have this, and talking, like you said, going into the overtime and everything, like, they call it like the big mo, right? Like the momentum. It just, the second Vernon didn't get that spot. And I know it's all ticky tacky, but it's like, if I'm in an argument with Dorothy or something, and you say something and then it starts to spiral and you're like, no, I didn't mean that. And you just feel like it gets out of hand, and you just wish you could pause time, right? And rewind, just, oh, can we just get 6 seconds back here? Cause to me, you have to play the perfect game or a perfect game to beat Winnipeg, right? Especially in these big, and we've seen Winnipeg drop a couple games this season, but you can't. And to me, what's crazy is, here, the sticking point we've had all year, is Vernon, is Vernon the guy, or what's going to happen? Vernon played awesome, right? Vernon here and played, a damn near perfect game against Winnipeg and their defense. And you saw, and not to go back to the Rhymes thing, but, they cut to Vernon and you see him just exacerbated because he did it, right? It wasn't, the spot was on him. It was his time to shine, and he did it, and he got it. There's nothing more Vernon can do in that point. And so to me, that was just amazing about that as well. As many questions we've had about Vernon this year, he really shown to me in the biggest spotlight he's been in so far. And it still wasn't enough, if that makes sense. Jason, what do you have?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to build off Evan's point, like the CFL is a very year-to-year league as it is. So, I mean, generally you don't see rosters, stay together all too long in the cores of rosters. Winnipeg's is, nearing the end as well. They got some really old players over there. So, I mean, it just so happens that BC and Winnipeg, they've kind of built up at the same time. And, you can only get so far if you can't beat the top teams in your own division. Talking about Hamilton, I mean, yeah, they've went on a hot streak recently, but can they beat Montreal and Toronto? They're a combined 0-6 versus those teams this season. So at the end of the day, especially in a league like the CFL, there's only one path to go to get to the Grey Cup, and if you can't beat those top teams, you're not going to go very far.
Yeah, it's like they talk in Evan, we're talking about the Chiefs and all that. Like NFL, you're building teams specifically just to beat other teams, right? Because like no matter what happens, and I mean, shoot, we just saw that on Sunday with the Giants and 49ers. Like the Cowboys, or what did I say? The Cowboys and 49ers, like the Cowboys are built to beat the 49ers, right? And we saw what happened, and it's a good measuring stick of that. And we'll see. I'm going to Vegas tonight with the Kraken and the Golden Knights. Like, we'll see how we've done here in terms of that, but frustrating. I mean, obviously, like we said, the season isn't done yet, but it certainly feels like this was the time. And I just, like Evan said, kind of work in and get back to that point. Like, are you really doing that again? I don't know. Evan, anything else?
I mean, if you want to talk about, well, I'll talk about Vernon specifically, real quick. The TSM panelists were saying that this was probably the biggest game of Vernon's career, and I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think we can all agree, like you said, Reed, Vernon did everything that he could. He could have, maybe another touchdown would have helped or whatever, but he did everything that he could with what he was given. Yes, it slowed down in the second half, whatever, but he really, went out there. And I mean, he could have, I think there was some concern that he could have just went out there and, laid an egg, would have not had the passing yards, would have turned the ball over a lot. I think that was a concern for a lot of people because, again, as I pointed out, Vernon is a very good quarterback, someone that I guess you could say is still in the MOP discussion, perhaps, maybe not with this loss. But again, with the way he played, he's still a good quarterback. It's just, sometimes we see him go on these, streaks. If one bad thing happens, then it all kind of unravels. And then that might have not made this game entertaining at all if things had gone in that direction. But Vernon, really, I feel like if you're a BC fan, again, obviously a lot of emotions right now. Your head's probably spinning. You're probably wondering, what to do. And, you're already kind of gearing up for, you're probably not even thinking about, the rest of the regular season. You're just like, I need to fast forward and just get into Winnipeg and see what happens to give me some closure, whether it's good or bad. But, if I'm a BC fan, I still feel like, you should have confidence in Vernon. And I really do feel like, as crazy as it sounds, like, last year it seemed like BC was on top of the world with Nathan Rourke and that was their guy. But there was always that pending thought in the back of people's minds that he was going to leave because he was almost too good, and obviously now Rourke's gone. He's in the NFL with the Jaguars. You don't have that anymore. So they bring in Vernon. And again, no one really thought about that a lot last year. Yes, he played a bit at the end of the season, but that wasn't really on anybody's minds. Now it looks like, because again, Vernon's playing well, but he's not somebody that you're going to lose. Vernon is becoming a CFL veteran at this point. That move to bring in Vernon by BC, might go down as one of the better moves in the CFL. I'm not going to measure it in terms of years, but just in recent memory, I think one of the better moves by a front office that they could have made, where it's like, okay, we know that our quarterback's likely going to leave. Who do we want to bring in? But it was also the timing of when they brought him in. They could have waited until the offseason, to go pursue somebody to bring in for 2023. But they made the move during 2022 to ensure that player would still be there, which in this case is Vernon, to get that early development and prepare him for a starting role, now, I guess. And yeah, Vernon, I feel like he really, I'm not going to speak for him, but given that he's, a native of Washington, I'm sure he feels at home, in BC. And I feel like this seems like the best spot for him to kind of finish his career, kind of ride it out. And I feel like BC, it feels like it goes both ways. It's just comfortable in general. I feel like he could stay there. He can be productive and he can kind of call it a career there when he wants to. Again, he's still got a couple more years. I'm not saying, this is the end of anything. I feel like they can, keep doing things. But again, like I brought up before, yeah, they can keep Vernon, but how long is the Grey Cup window really open? And that's a question that I think will be answered for us in a couple weeks come playoffs. So.
Yeah. I gotta see the what's the contract status with these receivers, and can we kind of keep those pieces together here? Jason, any other thoughts on this? We'll kind of yacht to the Argos. I gotta hit a plane here pretty soon. Anything else on the BC?
Yeah, I just wanted to, build on your point there about, the players that they make lose, because they'll price themselves out of BC. The defense has a lot of, talented players as well at all three levels that are going to need paying as well. So, I mean, at the end of the day, how long are you going to be able to keep this, core together? That's a big question.
Last game here, like I said, we were driving up in the road, and we had the Mike Mitchell's agreement with the XFL news coming out. I'm trying to tweet that. I wasn't listening to this game as much driving up. Evan, any short thoughts on this? Like I said, we'll get out of here at the top of the hour.
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, this loss officially eliminated Edmonton from the playoffs, I believe. Not surprising, but I think killed a pipe dream for a couple people. The Trey Ford. We're all Trey Ford believers, but the real Trey Ford homers who, probably think that he, and I might agree with this too, but, maybe could be better than some of the quarterbacks that we see in the playoffs here in a couple weeks. That pipe dream is now gone. Unfortunately, Edmonton is looking forward to 2024. For Ford specifically, it was an okay game. Didn't, flash some things as he normally does, but the 2 interceptions, weren't ideal. Again, it's growing pains, right? As much as he's a cool player to watch, he's fun, he's electric, whatever. Like, he's still learning. He's only started so many games, and I think people are quick to forget that because he looks so poised sometimes. And he looks like he has, he does have, I should say, a wide skill set. But yeah, I expected Toronto to win this game regardless of what their management plan was. And, Chad Kelly did play in this game. A very pedestrian performance by Toronto again, like on their side. But, if pedestrian is putting up 35 points, I'd say that's a pretty good sign. AJ Ouellette, kind of doing his thing. They had a couple other guys. Deontay McMahon scored a touchdown from McNeese out here in Louisiana. I interviewed him last year, so that's kind of, again, been really cool to see Toronto incorporate guys like that. And they're really picking guys up from everywhere. You'll hear Mike Mitchell talk about how much he appreciates that scouting department, and the Quantez Stiggers of the world and the Cameron Dukes of the world, right? You're kind of picking guys from everywhere. No stone left unturned, I think, would be the best way to put that. But anyways, even in a game that I guess you would call slow for Toronto, they still go out, they still put up 35 points, and it's just kind of it's automatic for them at this point. It doesn't matter who's playing for them really here in these last couple games of the season, because they're just so deep that they can go out and beat anybody. So very expected result for me. It's too bad. Maybe Edmonton could have tried to make a bit of a statement and kept the dream alive for another week. I don't know, that would have been fun, but it's a game, right? I think just given the severity of the other game, the Winnipeg BC game that we just talked about, I don't know how many people were actually paying attention to this one, unless you were an Edmonton or Toronto fan, obviously. But, decent game, I guess. Couple good players, is what it is. It was ultimately a blowout, I guess you'd call it. So,
Jason, any quick thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Edmonton just dug themselves too big of a hole this season to ultimately climb back out of it and get a playoff spot. I thought that, obviously they've shown a lot of improvement over the second half of the season, but they have a ways to go to get on the same level as a team like Toronto. And we saw that in this game. Trey Ford had one spectacular play where he kind of danced around and found Gavin Cobb for a touchdown, one of the plays of the CFL season. But besides that, he hasn't really, didn't really show a lot of consistency in this game. Had a really bad interception that I believe went back for a pick six. So I think at the end of the day, Edmonton just pretty disappointing to not be more competitive in this one. But ultimately, missing the playoffs was inevitable.
But he's Canadian, Jason. That Canadian quarterback, Trey Ford, they make him die. Yeah, so we'll see. Interesting week. Like I said, Farhan's coming up this week, and then I'm going to have, I think, Greg Peach on the show as well, former CFLer. So it should be good. We'll figure out what's going on with the XFL stuff. Like I said, I'm getting ready to head to the airport. Pouring rain here. I think it's 90 degrees in Vegas, so should be quite a change here. Evan, appreciate it. Jason, everyone watching. We'll get out of here, and like I said, Show Friday. Check out Jason's previews and everything going on his channel, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.